Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villeries Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villeries provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villeries Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency. Auto, home, flood, business, 504-556-0809. Dave Miette, INSagency.com.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, tire siping, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
C&C Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, C&C provides patient-centered care for your entire family. C&C Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we'll cover all the home teams, the Saints, Pelicans, LSU, Tulane. We'll talk college football, college baseball, and of course the pro teams as well. Breaking it down for us, two of the best we have here in the city. Garland, Gillen of Fox 8 Sports and also Brett Martel of the Associated Press are on the panel this afternoon. Guys, welcome to the show. Good to have both of you back. Garland, why don't we start with you? Tell us about all the great programming over at Fox 8, your fantastic blog, and of course the folks already know from the screen how they can follow you on social media.
Yeah. So we got on Thursday nights we do Final Bet where we talk all kind of sports gambling. We're almost coming up on a year, and who knew we would do this year round? Yes. I didn't see we were going to be talking about horse racing and golf and tennis, but it's done really well. Final plays on Sunday night. I'll have a one-on-one with Arch Manning, one of my, I've covered him since he was in 7th grade. I got the interview the other day. We're going to air it, the full one-on-one interview. And then Monday, Bogalusa football last year. I don't know if you remember this, but Edwin Good, my photographer, and I were there for a game on homecoming. A shootout broke out right at the end of the game. So we went back and visited 2 weeks ago. Edwin was there the whole time. So we talked to how the players reacted to that, how we're moving forward, kind of get the, bring some positivity to the story. So that airs Monday night. So even though it's kind of maybe a little of the off season, it's really not. We're really heating up with a lot of sports content.
And of course your blog.
Yeah, football food. I was at the Card Destrehan game last night, and one of the coaches, when I was leaving, goes, "Where are you going to eat? I want to know where you're going to eat right now." And I was like, I'm really tired, man. I just actually might get some takeout. But I've been on a big fried chicken kick, so I've been going to a lot of fried chicken places recently.
And you mentioned something recently about the heir apparent to Arch Manning at Newman. You did something on that, right?
Correct, yeah. So this week I did a story. You can find it on Twitter, my Facebook, my Instagram, even my TikTok. I'm on all 4 of the social media platforms. His name's Eli Friend. He's going to be a junior this fall at Newman. He's actually more known for his lacrosse prowess. Okay. He's one of the best lacrosse players in the city. Really fast player. Played running back last year when Arch was quarterback. So now Arch is obviously University of Texas. So Eli Friend's the new quarterback. I actually got Arch to go to practice this past Wednesday, and that's how I got the one-on-one. But Arch talked glowingly about Eli Friend. So Eli's going to be the quarterback for the next 2 years. But these past 2 years, he got to learn from one of the greatest of all time at Newman. So I'm really intrigued to see how he does. Right now we're in spring football for high school, so I've been going to a lot of these different schools checking it out, and they have their spring game tomorrow against Franklinton.
I wonder if there's another Manning in the pike here for Newman.
Well, I will say this. Peyton's son Marshall is just finished in the 6th grade, but they're going to stay in Denver. Yeah, that's where Peyton and his wife and their twins are living. So I heard Marshall's already playing tackle football. He's, of course, playing quarterback. Peyton coached him this past year. So if that's the next one, Eli has like a son he has 3 daughters and a son. The son's only like 2 years old. So, but yeah, so look out for Marshall Manning in like 4 years.
There you go. Brett, welcome to the show. Of course, again, with a great, the Associated Press. Tell us all about that and what you've been working on.
Yeah, so the AP, of course, is headquartered in New York City and is a global news organization. Just won a couple of Pulitzer Prizes for coverage of the Ukraine war, and I was not involved in that.
Although you have traveled a lot for the Associated Press.
I have, and not far from Ukraine. I was in Russia in 2018 for the World Cup, and it's and so I know a good bit about that part of the world and people from over there, and it's really a tragic situation.
Yes.
Especially as culturally similar as those, and those two peoples are. It's kind of crazy what's happening. But to go back to what I do for the AP in New Orleans, just all the major sports, Saints, Pelicans. Anything in the region, such as LSU. AP does the top 25. Garland is a AP top 25 football voter, and has been reliably for years, as well as a voter in our all SEC teams.
Oh yeah, that's the fun one, man. And that takes a lot of my time.
Although AP doesn't cover college baseball game by game during the regular season, we do cover the College World Series in Omaha and some of the stuff leading up to that.
Sure.
And I'm actually working on something on LSU baseball, having the top 2 major league prospects heading up to the next draft, and Dylan Cruz and Paul Skeens. Very rare for one college to have the top 2 prospects, and it's kind of rare even. I mean, a lot of the top prospects come out of high school still for baseball, because they can go straight to low A ball, but doesn't appear to be the case this year. So.
Something we'll get into a little bit later in the program, the troubles LSU's having right now with their pitching and being able to close out games. Let's start with the Saints. Guys, before we get into specifics about the draft, rookie minicamp, etc., a lot of people, again, giving out their thoughts on, again, the power rankings within the NFL. And what they believe, again, as we go into this, into preseason camps, how strong teams are. Most of them have the Saints in the 20s, okay, and most of the NFC South, again, in the 20s into the 30s. Based on what you've seen them do in this offseason, what other teams have done, do you concur with that? Do you think, again, that they are a team that is, again, not even in the top 15 of the NFL?
I would say maybe in the teens, but if you look at the betting odds, they're the favorite to win the NFC South. Their over-under's 9.5. They're favored in their opener against the Tennessee Titans by 3.5. So they're the best of the least, I guess you could say, in that division. I mean, it doesn't take a lot to win that. Last year the Bucs won at 8-9. So I think 9-8 is probably going to win it this year. I mean, give me the other team in that division that's going to be like a world beater. It's not going to be Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask in the Bucs. There's going to be a lot of bumps in the road if they do start Bryce Young from week 1, if they don't go with Andy Dalton, if they just decide to go Bryce Young right then and there. And then in Atlanta, I've been a big critic of Desmond Ridder. I think he's okay quarterback. I thought that's where they should have went for Lamar Jackson, and they just kind of stayed pat on that. I thought if they got Lamar Jackson, they would be like a major contender. But now they have Desmond Ridder. Obviously, they got Bijan Robinson in the draft, and they got some receivers. But I just went through the 3 teams. The Saints, I think, if you put on everything out there, they have the best quarterback out of all 4 teams right now. no, they're not one of the best teams in the NFL. I don't think they're in the top 10. But if you win your division, that means you get a guaranteed home playoff game. And then once you get to the next round, you never know what's going to happen. So I think the Saints are in a great position right now. They filled their need with Foster Moore. I'm sure we'll talk a little more about that. I was like a little blown away they didn't get a tight end in the draft once they tried Troutman, but now you see they got Foster Morrow, and they still have a linebacker opening, and maybe I don't want to have too many Jezza Blue Jays on the Saints roster. I went to De La Salle, but I'll let it slide. But if they get, Debo's still out there, so Debo Jones is still out there, because that's one of the biggest problem thing is linebackers.
I think so too.
Yeah.
But you think it's a middle of the road team?
It is a middle of the road team. Yes.
How about you, Brett?
Well, I always put a lot of faith in the Vegas over/under odds for wins, just because that's the one forecaster or prognosticator that puts their money where their mouth is, so to speak.
Yeah.
And and they've been pretty close the last couple of years in the Saints, actually.
Yeah.
But I'm with Garland, and first of all, I can easily foresee the Saints playing meaningful football, even if they're mediocre, throughout the regular season. As far as contending beyond that, it's hard to know, but sometimes teams catch lightning in a bottle at the end of the year if they have the right combination of health and just scheme, chemistry, things coming together, the right matchups on game day in the playoffs. Obviously there are Cinderella stories all the time.
Sure.
The key for the Saints is just to get there, first of all. So there's reason for optimism in that regard. I understand why they're being overlooked like that, because they weren't really flashy last year.
Right.
They ground out a lot of wins. They had a lot of really botched games too, and they had obviously just problems. Their quarterback plan kind of blew up on them, and they had issues with health, especially Michael Thomas again. So we keep waiting and keep having to say if they're healthy, but obviously,
that's the truth.
If they are, and they keep saying optimistic things about Michael Thomas, and if he's healthy and motivated, he had 3 touchdowns in 3 games last year, right? So a receiver gets 10 touchdowns in a season, that's a really good season. If Derek Carr pans out the way they hope he will, and if their defense continues to be as good as it was last year, then they can be maybe even better than people thought.
Yeah.
I think the key is going to be on the defensive line. Another reason they're probably being underestimated is because they lost some key guys in the interior defensive line.
That's true.
They also had one of their worst years against the run right before they lost those guys in about 5 years.
Right.
And they hope that they've made at least one key replacement with their number 1 overall.
Yeah.
not overall in the draft, but the Saints' top draft pick.
Right.
Yeah. So we'll see.
Guys, 13 of the 17 games are indoors. It's hard, it's hard to tell what a team's going to be, right? Again, we've seen teams go from worst to first, but on paper, this looks like again a schedule that is winnable. Most people are that kind of look at these schedules say it's the second easiest schedule in the NFL. Again, I don't know how much I buy that, but again, if you're just looking at when they play teams. Playing most of their games indoors, it does favor them.
Yeah, the only thing I'm concerned about with the schedule is that, or one of my concerns is that 4 out of the first 6 games are on the road, and then they go to Carolina in week 2, and then on a short week they got to go to Green Bay. Now you could also say they're going against either Bryce Young or Andy Dalton, and then you're going against Jordan Love in Green Bay. Right. So you could definitely split those games. Tennessee in the Dome. In week 1, they got some major problems. I'm still surprised Tannehill's around as a starting quarterback. I know there's a lot of talk of getting Derrick Henry maybe traded in the offseason. So the Titans are kind of going through a change. Maybe Will Levis, maybe halfway through the season takes over that job. We shall see. But to have the 4 of 6 at the beginning, now you get the 4 of 6 at the end. So it all kind of plays out. But I will say this. I have friends that are season ticket holders. The home games this year are just not appealing if you're trying to sell your tickets. But if you're trying to win games, fantastic.
Right.
But there's not a lot of flashy opponents on the home schedule this year. But I do see those are a lot of wins on that schedule. And like as you said, there are a lot of indoors games where, hey, you got Green Bay in September. You got New England early also, which is huge.
You're not
going to New England, as Brett can attest, going to New England in December and January is absolutely miserable.
Well, after last year's Cleveland game, they're probably hopeful they don't have to go back into those elements anymore.
Well, I don't know. I kind of have a counterpoint here just to throw out there. I mean, no scientific basis for it, except that the Saints are kind of a defensive team now.
Yeah.
And they went to Cleveland and to Philly. And won late last year.
Philly without Hurts.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah. Gardner Minshew, I think, was quarterback.
Yeah, it didn't do well.
But, they went in December to some cold weather games, and including a really, now Cleveland wasn't playing well either, but, I think just because this isn't Sean Payton's Saints, right? With Darren Sproles and Derry Henderson, or whoever you want to say, Robert Meacham. So when you look at like the indoor games, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that does help them the way they're built now. So I guess that just remains to be seen. But I know, obviously, conventional wisdom is they play in a dome, and they're used to that, and they practice indoors in Airline Highway, and they're a warm weather team. But so we'll see.
Yeah. You broke a story this week about Cam Jordan and the Saints working on a 2-year extension. There's $23.4 million in dead money if they don't get a deal done. So from a financial standpoint, it makes sense. He'll be 34 years old by the time the season starts. 2-year deal might put him, 36, 37. The hope is that if that happens, and I hope it does, that he can retire as a Saint, but they finally need to get some help on the other side for this guy so that he's not getting constantly double teamed. What are your thoughts on Cam Jordan? Some people believe he's a descending player. I'd like to get both your takes on that. But tell us a little bit about what you reported this week.
Sure. I was able to speak to his agent, who Doug Hendrickson is his agent. He's with Wasserman. He went on the record and said that they've been in talks for a deal of at least 2 years. It sounds to me from talking to him like 2 years is the most realistic range, and that's 2 years after this season.
After this season, right.
Cam says he thinks he has 3 to 4 more good years left.
Okay.
So 2 years after the season, or 3 maybe, would make sense.
That puts him close to 40.
Well, no, I mean, 34 this year,
34?
35, 36, and maybe 37 if it's 4 years. So really 36, I think, when he's finished. But that would also give him 15 years with the Saints, and he's got 12 seasons so far, right? I think Strahan played for the Giants 15 years. I mean, you've seen guys at that position play deep into their careers. Sometimes, like Peppers and Reggie White, those guys bounced around at the end, but there was still a place for them in the NFL. Cam Jordan has taken extraordinarily good care of himself. He's missed 2 out of 194 regular season games in his career, and none out of 11 playoff games. That's really amazing.
Right. And one of those games was COVID?
And one was COVID. He tested positive. He felt fine. Right. You know what I mean? But he came up with a positive test, and he wanted to play, I think, through the other injury, but they wouldn't let him. So, was it an eye injury? I'm trying to remember.
Oh, I remember the COVID game.
Yeah, but So, anyway. Now, as far as a descending player, I mean, he had 8.5 sacks last year. He did kind of lead the team. Early in his career, he had seasons with less than 8.5 sacks. And like you said, a lot of it just comes down to how much help he's getting, both on the interior, on the other end.
It really is.
And last year they had problems with some health and stuff with Marcus Davenport, and then Peyton Turner just hadn't quite gotten into the form that they need him to be, and hope he'll be in this year in his, I believe, 3rd season. So, we'll have to see. I mean, I don't think that. I think calling him a descending player now, you can't just base it on stats. You really have.
I agree.
I think it's a little bit speculation that's kind of tied to an educated speculation, tied to how old he is and how many defensive ends continue to be great at that age, and not many, but. He is a little bit outside the box in terms of what kind of shape he's in and how durable he's been. So.
Yeah. I don't see him as a descending player. I see him as not getting enough help on that. By this time in his career, there should be other guys that take on those double teams. He should be singled up. He's not. What do you think about him extending his contract? Again, it helps him with the cap because they don't have to eat that $23.4 million. But also, again, is he a descending player in your eyes?
No, as Brett alluded to, I think he's in fantastic shape. And who are your other options for the New Orleans Saints right now? At the other side, possibly Carl Granderson could beat out Peyton Turner. Carl Granderson is an undrafted free agent coming out of Wyoming. Peyton Turner's been a major disappointment so far. Then you just drafted Foskey in the second round. Foskey's probably going to get a lot of playing time this year because Peyton Turner just can't stay healthy. Same problem with the guy that's out of there now, who's in Minnesota on a one-year deal, Marcus Davenport. I'm sure Marcus Davenport will probably turn it on fire this year after doing no shows this past season and most of his Saints career. He had a half sack this past year. He was I think he was a bust as a draft pick. I was there in Dallas when they traded up to get him. I thought the Saints had a great shot to get Lamar Jackson. I was like, oh my gosh, they're going to trade up to get Lamar Jackson? They got Marcus Davenport. It didn't turn out well. So I think that he can no doubt stay on that other side and stay there for 2 or 3 more years because there's not a lot of great players at those positions on the New Orleans Saints.
Guys, and I'll take you first on this. Brett, it looked like it was a draft where they went for positions of need, okay? Where they again more than best player available. Maybe they was on their board, but they really went after need players. It's hard to tell with a draft, but just on paper, on what they did, how do you think they did?
Well, I don't want to. I know that some people didn't grade them very well.
Right.
But you know this brain trust has been pretty good on the draft overall, and they've had some really good years. They've had some guys that didn't pan out, but they clearly went with the attitude that we'll have our best players available, but then we're going to give considerable weight to need.
Right.
So if 2 guys are close and one plays, offensive line, and the other one plays defensive line, well, we just lost some key defensive linemen. We need help. And so that's where they went. And they went with the prototype that Dennis Allen believes in, in terms of size and so forth. And I think that, although they talk about the philosophy and culture being similar when Sean Payton leaves and Dennis Allen takes over, I think that's more kind of like organizationally, because Dennis Allen has some different ideas about football, and I actually think that he believes that a lot of the skill players, maybe not quarterback necessarily, but that you can find skill players when you need them, but you can't always find really large human beings who are extremely athletic and can stuff up the line of scrimmage or move people out of the way and protect the quarterback, vice versa. I think he thinks that those are the guys that are harder to find, that are reliably great, and so he puts an emphasis on that.
And they did with their first 2 picks, with Bresee and obviously with Foskey. Again, a need pick with Miller in the 3rd round. Saliveri, again, a 4th round pick. They went with both their guards on 1-year deals. And then, of course, a quarterback that they took a flyer on with Hainer in the 4th round, who could maybe be a backup or maybe a starter one day for him. A lot of people like the safety, again, if just being a special teams player, what he did at Minnesota. And of course, A.T. Perry looks like, again, he could be a steal in the 6th round based on, again, what a lot of people had him maybe graded out to be. What are your thoughts on what they did in this draft?
Yeah, we'll say they lost defensive linemen in free agency. So Bresee was a major need. I think he's going to be playing right away. I'm not saying he's going to start in week 1, but he's going to play. We just went over the defensive end spot is very fragile right now. So Foskey, you'll see time. We expect that Kamara is going to have some kind of suspension. We've been talking about it for 2 years now. His court date is July 30th in Las Vegas. I think it's going to finally happen. They've had continuances 2 times now. So then you got, he'll probably miss some time on the front end. Jamal Williams is going to be in there. But you got DeAndre Miller, who didn't participate in rookie minicamp. But Dennis Allen said he'll be ready to roll for training camp. We shall see. Obviously, that guy is like shot out of a cannon when he rolls. And then Saliveri, sooner or later, you're going to have to move on from Andres Pete and Cesar Ruiz. Ruiz, this could be the last year of his deal.
Could be on both.
Yeah, and Pete. So I think it made total sense. Saliveri's already kicked inside, even though he played tackle at ODU, Old Dominion. He's now inside at guard. He worked there in rookie minicamp. I think Saliveri is in that rotation. And then quarterback, I really think listen, this is going to happen around the league with San Francisco, with Brock Purdy.
Right.
I think every year you should just take a flyer on a quarterback in round 4 or 5. Jake Haener, if it works out, after this year, you get rid of Jameis Winston. Haener comes the backup. You draft another one every single year, 4th or 5th, 6th round. Just kind of get. Sooner or later, you're going to hit gold on one of these guys. You got Derek Carr up front. You know what? Yes, you're going to miss. Garrett Grayson did not turn out well at all. But maybe Jake Haener does turn out, and then what, you got a quarterback maybe for 5 to 10 years. I agree with you. So I think every year they should take a flyer, and then I like on A.T. Perry. 3 receivers are locks for this roster. Michael Thomas, you know, as I expected, his Instagram workout videos look fantastic as usual. I knew they were coming sooner or later. Now they are. So you got Michael Thomas, Rashid Shaheed, and Chris Olave. But after that, you got like 9 guys that are going into camp and for 2 or 3 spots. So I understand why they got A.T. Perry. I mean, they took in James Washington the other day. They got Brian Edwards. You got Kirk Merritt. You got Keith Kirkwood, Traquan Smith. I could go on. And I mean, it is insane the amount of wide receivers.
Yeah, but how many guys are quality NFL players at this point? That's the question.
Well, that's why I think A.T. Perry, even though he was a 6th round draft pick, I know some people had him as a 4th rounder. I think it was very smart to bring him in. The thing I'm intrigued to see if they're going to put him on the active roster, because I don't know if he kind of burns in camp and like kind of kills it. If you try to put him on the practice squad, somebody else might poach him. So there's a chance that A.T. Perry can make that roster, which a lot of 6th rounders usually don't make that roster. So going through all these guys, I think that they filled needs at every single position, and now I think they're at 89 on the roster. I think this is pretty much who you're going to grow with the camp, unless you pick up one more linebacker maybe in that free agency.
That's going to be my next question. Let me go to Brett first. We'll see what James Washington does. Well, you know, Edwards, those are guys that are just kind of journeymen. Wide receiver, if those guys don't work out, is still a need. Defensive tackle, maybe, depending on how quickly you get Brissy in this rotation, but you still may need another one. Defensive end, I still think, again, unless Foskey really turns it on in camp, they may have to go get a veteran defensive end. They got $16 million to spend before they pay their rookies. They've never had that, maybe since the middle of the Peyton era, in terms of money to spend during free agency after the draft. And then, as you mentioned, another linebacker. So I think there are at least 4 positions where they can add a veteran. What do you think?
Yeah, they could. You know, when you usually expect guys drafted in the first 3 rounds, though, to be able to contribute.
Plug and play.
Right away. Even if they don't start, you expect them to be someone that can play. So, you know, those 2 defensive linemen especially, I would expect them.
Yeah.
And
Foskey and Brissy starting. At least in the rotation, right?
Yeah, right. Brissy starting and Foskey in the rotation.
Okay.
Yeah. So getting back, I wanted to mention on Haener, how ironic would it be, though, you know, because they've done this quite a few times, right? Whether you look at Ian Book or, and you mentioned Garrett Grayson. I go back and I think about, was Tyler Palko one of those?
Yes. That was way back.
I mean, wouldn't it be ironic if Haener actually? Now, Chase Daniel was okay. Right?
He made a career as a backup.
Yeah. If Haener turned into something, that would be kind of amazing. But, you know, the Saints obviously believe that using a first-round draft pick on a quarterback is too much risk involved, according to their calculations, risk
especially
versus
not in
reward.
the top 5, right?
Yeah.
And even then, it's a risk.
They haven't done it since Archie Manning in 1971.
Well, and then, of course, Dave Wilson was supplemental draft in the 80s.
The teams that bust on quarterbacks, it can really, really set them back. And it seems like you're more likely to bust on a high-drafted quarterback and have it really hurt you for a long time than any other position. Really.
Well, they got a type, though, right? Haener looks like a Breeze clone.
So and so to Garland's point, though, it does make sense. It does make a lot of sense in the 4th round or so, because there's less risk involved. If it doesn't pan out, and if it does pan out, then you kind of struck gold there.
Especially with Winston on a 1-year deal.
Yeah. So I think that's interesting. And then just circling back. Yeah, I mean, linebacker, you know, I think they hope that the Pete Warner is going to continue to grow. Maybe they'll get more from Zach Bond, and then they, you know, you have to hope that Demario Davis continues to play at a high level.
Jackson from last year's draft.
Yeah.
That and what was it, Sewell, the kid that really came on last year in camp, was on the practice squad. But when you got if you're going for it, and you got let's say $14 million after you pay your rookies, were you going to let that money just sit there, or are you going to try to be able to go out and get a veteran that can help you at maybe a position where you feel like I need some backfill?
Yeah, and I mean, Zach Bond, they might cut bait on him finally. This
or playing where he should be as a rush linebacker, right? I mean, that's what he did at Wisconsin.
Yeah.
I mean, they haven't played him there at all.
Yeah, I mean, right now you have two reliable linebackers,
right,
and one of them, I'm sorry to say, is always hurt, Pete Warner.
Injured. Right.
And I feel like that's still that's their biggest weakness, I think, on the team right now is just depth at that position.
Yeah.
Because I'm sorry, the facts say that Pete Warner, not the facts, the stats say that Pete Warner's not going to make it all 17 games. Now, Demario Davis is like Cam Jordan, like going to live forever and play football forever. Demario is always in great shape.
Yes.
Demario, I think, has some tread left on the tires, just like Cam does.
Yeah. And of course, I think he's in the last year of his deal too, if I'm not mistaken. So I have to figure out what they're going to do there. Foster Moreau, great story. Jesuit kid, goes to LSU, ends up with the Raiders. Thinking about coming back to his hometown team. They find the Hodgkin's lymphoma. Most of us think he's out to at least October, November. And then Sean Vizen's on my radio show last week, and we're discussing. I'm saying, well, again, he signs with the Saints 3 years to $12 million. It's a great story, but maybe he won't be available until maybe October, November. And then there was a talk that maybe training camp. Sean tells me he's going to be ready for OTAs, which is an amazing story when you talk about a guy that they really kind of need as a blocking tight end, but also a guy that catches the ball, and a guy that has obviously a relationship with Derek Carr.
Yeah, Foster. I mean, OTAs. So we get our first viewing
next week.
We get one press where we get to watch it on Tuesday. So we're all. I mean, it's going to be like the Super Bowl for us because I think we'll have 3 OTA viewing periods, days, and then we have mandatory mini camps. So there's not a lot of opportunities. Foster Moreau has been kind of doubted his whole career. I went back and looked at the video of the day of National Sign Day for LSU. He wasn't told until that morning that he could actually sign with LSU.
Right.
He was waiting around that morning.
Wasn't he going to Tulane?
He had, if LSU wasn't, he wanted a full ride.
Okay.
Les told him just wait. And then one of the other kids committed somewhere else. So the morning of, I was at Jesuit. I was on Bank Street. He signed with the other one, and you could see the relief in his face. I mean, I'm sure he went to bed that night. It's totally stressful. But then he got to LSU and was lights out. Won a state title at Jesuit. 2014 to beat John Curtis in the Dome was a epic game that I got to cover. And went to the Raiders. Had a stellar career. Nothing. I wouldn't call it a great, but it's stellar career.
But he grew every year.
Yeah,
he was better last year than he was the first 2 years.
And now he's got his quarterback in Carr. It seems like they had something good. They need him, Moreau, because right now you got Juwan Johnson. Taysom Hill is a tight end, and then your fourth is Lucas Krull.
Lucas Krull, that's right.
Who I could see they started to like on the back end of the year. You got some playing time, but that's another spot where it's
kind of shaky.
It's not the greatest.
Really, but I think Morrow kind of solves the problem if he's healthy.
Yeah, because Juwan Johnson isn't blocking. That ain't happening.
No,
okay.
He's a receiver tight end.
Lucas Krull is probably one of your best blockers. Foster can maybe pop in there, but Taysom Hill is more of an H-back, not a 10 end, but he's tight end on the roster.
Before we go to break, your thoughts on Foster Moreau?
Yeah, we'll have to see, what exactly participation in OTAs means. But yeah, I asked Dennis Allen last week during rookie camp, is he really going to be ready for the upcoming OTAs? And he said, absolutely. So, the
marvels of modern medicine.
He could mean that Foster will be hanging around the facility, going to meetings and walking through things.
Right.
A lot of people when they get cancer, they can still. I've seen him out playing golf and stuff like that, right? And so, so he could be at the facility as much as possible with the anticipation that at some point during the season he'll be healthy enough to play, and then he needs to be ready. So
my biggest question was muscle mass and weight loss.
Yeah.
Okay, how do you get that back or be able to keep that for the upcoming season? And if he's going to be participating in OTAs, that means he could probably lift weights. So maybe that's not an issue going forward now.
Well, I believe he said it was stage 2, and it would require some chemotherapy.
There's no doubt. Yeah.
There's weight loss involved in that, but that was late March. He's a young person who's in really good shape.
Yeah, right.
His recovery time from something like this is going to be faster than other people.
Yeah.
So
I think it's a great story, and it's a great story for the city as well, no doubt. We will take a break, hear from our underwriters. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sport. Brett Martel of the Associated Press, Garland, Gillen of Fox 8 Sports are our guest. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Stay tuned.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Brett Martel, the Associated Press, Garland, Gillen of Fox 8 Sports are our guests. We go to the Pelicans, who again this week found out they'll be at the 14th pick. They did not move up in the draft lottery. The question is, again, with $10 million under the luxury tax threshold, 3 players that are making over $100 million in Zion Williamson, making $33 million this year. Brandon Ingram with 2 years left on his deal, making $33 million. And C.J. McCollum with, again, 3 years on his deal, making $35 million a year. You've got an expiring contract with Valanciunas, $15.4 million, which again may be trade bait for this team. They invested another 2 years in Larry Nance Jr., 2 years, $21 million. And then come the inexpensive part of the roster, but no less, again, players they need. Team options on Herb Jones, $1.8 million, Alvarado, $1.8 million, Marshall, $1.9 million, Hernan Gomez, $2.5 million, and Temple, $5.4 million. They got a qualifying offer for Hayes for $9.1 million, and Richardson is a free agent. I can see Hernan Gomez, Temple, Hayes, Richardson not with this team next year. You keep the Jones, Alvarado, and Marshall on their team option because it's cheap, and then it maybe opens up a little bit of space to be able to come in and maybe make a trade to try to upgrade this roster. To me, in this draft, and I was just talking to Brett about it in the break, they need an athletic big and they need shooters. So if you're looking at athletic bigs in the draft at 14, what may drop to you, and then the ability of those players to be able to quickly acclimate themselves to the NBA, it's much more difficult than to have just a knockdown shooter that can come in from college, that all you're doing is on spacing, giving him the ball, and again, and him knocking down shots. So to me, if they don't trade out of this pick, my guess is they're going to go for a shooter. I'd like to get your take on that as well, considering, again, how I just went through the cap, what they have, the possibility of maybe trading Valanciunas, unloading Hernan Gomez, was not happy here based on his playing time. Temple, who's making too much money to bring back at $5.4 million in terms of his deal. And, of course, Hayes is just not panned out.
Eric, ask me this, okay? You've watched a ton of Pelicans games. Brett Martell's in the Smith King Center. Who on that roster, with 5 seconds to go, are you confident they can hit a shot from around the 3-point line, jump shot? Is it just Ingram and Trey Murphy? Is it even Trey Murphy in there?
I'll say Trey Murphy got much better this season, and maybe I would feel much more comfortable. But the guy I'm giving the ball to is Brandon Ingram. But he's had a tough time closing out games at the end, right?
So I put all that on there, and Brett can answer this also. It's got to be a guy that can put the. I mean, to its simplest form, a guy who can put the ball in the hoop.
Knockdown shooter, right?
Yeah, and I don't think there's a lot of guys that can do that on the Pelicans right now. So yeah, I think it's an outside shooter because there's not a lot of guys you would lock in. This is the guy that's going to get it. It's no doubt going to go in. Now, nothing's 100%. I understand that. But I would say most teams that are good have 3 guys that maybe they can go to at the end of the game. You know they're going to hit the shot. The Pelicans, was it 1?
Mm-hmm. Well, McCollum
is 1. And he was hurt last year.
Yeah.
So maybe that hurt him.
He had to kind of figure out how to shoot with the injured thumb.
Right.
But he still had some games where he hit a lot of threes. But he wasn't consistent last year.
Right. So. And maybe that's a parcel because of the injury.
Maybe.
Okay, when you got a labrum issue and a thumb issue on your shooting shoulder and arm or hand, that's an issue. Brett, what do you think? I mean, is this a question, maybe they go into free agency or trade looking for an athletic big and maybe get a shooter in the draft, or maybe they're trading? Look, they got a bunch of draft picks coming up. Okay, Milwaukee's picks. They got pick swaps with Milwaukee. Those are first-round picks for the Drew Holiday deal. They got another pick swap with the Lakers that's available. And I think maybe one more pick, first-round pick. So they have picks in the pike here. But again, are those going to be lottery picks is the question. This is a lottery pick, even though it's a late lottery pick.
Well, certainly a shooter would help. And, you know, if we're talking about Willie Green's third season, David Griffin's fourth, right?
Fourth or fifth? Yeah, one or the other.
He's starting fifth, right? That's right. He had Gentry, and then
one year Van Gundy,
right? And this will be the Greens, yeah. So I think the urgency to win is getting kind of high.
I gotta believe it is, right?
Yeah, and so if you have an opportunity to bring in someone that can affect winning right away,
so that's a veteran.
It's probably a veteran, or if it's a rookie, it has to be a shooter.
It has to be a knockdown shooter.
Yeah.
It's just somebody that can fall out of bed and get you 20.
Right.
Have we got any idea that the ownership really wants to put up all this money? I think you and I talked about this on your radio show last year at the trade deadline. They got rid of Devontae Graham and brought in Josh Richardson so they can get under the luxury tax. And what would they get back from the other teams? I think $6 million. And look what the Lakers did around when it came down on the trades. Got Rui Hachimura, D'Angelo Russell, Jared Vanderbilt. They went for it all.
They totally revamped their roster.
Yeah, they went.
Not a lot of assets.
They went for it all, and now look where they're at. The Pelicans were worried about getting under the luxury tax, and that was it. I think they're just trying to make money. I mean, you look at their TV deal with Diamond Sports or Valley Sports. I mean, you're on an app watching these games. Like, are you going to go to another system where more fans want to watch your games? And then also, are you willing to spend the money? This just seems like a money-making operation.
I agree with you.
They just want to make money. I don't think they want to put as much in. The money that comes back from these contracts with TV contracts, they're making hand over fist.
And also luxury tax. Remember, they're not a taxpayer. They're getting.
I feel like this is just run like just a money-making business. This isn't. Oh, hey, we're trying to win a championship. I think that's the way it is. So I don't know if I have a lot of faith in this team to make the big-time moves and shell out the cash to win a title.
Brett, can you comment on that? Do you agree with that?
Well, I think that there's a small market formula and a big market formula. And in the case of the Lakers, it's not only a big market team, it's kind of one of the most storied franchises in NBA history and one of the biggest markets. So I do think that their considerations are of a different nature. You know, when the Pelicans spend big, they have to get it right or it's a disaster. You know, especially if they're going to go over the tax. And so if they didn't feel like, with all that was going on this year with Zion's injury and everything, I mean, if they didn't feel like they were going to be a contender this year, then, you know, maybe they needed to save it for another year and not do anything.
Well, especially they did that knowing that Zion's big extension's kicking in.
Right.
You know, again, they did give a 2-year extension to McCollum, which again would kick his pay up to like $35 a year. But again, the question is, do you want to win a championship or you don't? And if you want to win a championship in today's NBA, you almost, even Milwaukee was above the luxury tax. You have to go above the luxury tax if you're going to win a championship.
Right, so Milwaukee,
it's an arms race.
Yeah, they were coming off winning one though. And I think they viewed themselves as a legitimate contender this year, which I think the Pelicans, you know, they don't want to admit it, but did anyone see them as a legitimate contender?
Well, they obviously looked that way in January, right?
Yes, but once they saw the writing on the wall where the rehab, the pace of the rehab was going with Zion, you know, I don't know.
Speaking of Zion, what's optimistic with y'all? With how many? Okay, this new contract's what, 5 years?
Yeah, 4 years.
4 years.
Right, 4 years. Yeah, 4.
What's an optimistic talk? How many years he's actually going to be healthy and play?
First of all, what's the over/under? How many games he misses? And I would say 40.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that's saying that's 40 based on what he's done. Same thing with Brandon Ingram, and I think that's what you have to look at going into this season. How do you have your two top players, okay, that are making the majority of the money under your cap, and you can't rely on them for more than half a season each? You have to find another star that can augment that roster in case those guys go out, because they have not proven that they can. Or either that, or again, make a decision on one or the other. Will Guillory on Twitter today had a poll on, again, asking the fans how they would feel about if Zion Williamson was traded, and you and I discussed it before the show. Most people are disappointed now, going, you know what? I wouldn't mind cutting bait on Zion.
Yeah, if you get a worthy trade option,
right.
I could see it. I know fans are getting tired of it.
Right.
You play a hard-earned money and then some to see these games. I mean, these are expensive games. The Smoothie King Center you're going to. Zion isn't at them. He's hurt all the time. We have no idea what's actually going on with him. Is he healthier right now? Mm-hmm. And then the mixed messaging between David Griffin and Zion Williamson totally fumbling the bag. Mm-hmm. Somebody's got hurt feelings right now. We don't know where it is. I don't know if it's on the Pelicans organization or is it Zion. Somebody has hurt feelings. Something's going to come to a head soon, okay? And I mean, I say optimistic. It might be 2 years. Right. I think that Zion's in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. I think that it could end right. before that contract, because fans are not happy with him, and then somebody, I don't know if it's going to be Zion's
mm-hmm.
side. I think his stepfather kind of runs the operation. Mm-hmm. Somebody's got hurt feelings right now, and it's going to be known. And once these playoffs are over with, this is when the Brian Windhorses of the world and the Woj kind of floated out there. Zion's not happy, and then that's when it all kind of starts with the AD. That's all, folks. It could definitely happen again with Zion.
Brett, I think the fans guys get injured. I think what they get frustrated is that Zion gets injured and then he falls out of shape, so he's not able to come back from the injury.
Right. I think what they're frustrated with is that the team can't figure out how long it's going to take for him to get back. Usually they say this is a 4 to 6 week injury, and in 4 to 6 weeks, barring some kind of major setback, the player's on his way back. And that's the same with most professional athletes and most professional sports and most professional teams. And then we have this one megastar here where they just can't seem to figure it out.
Right. Everybody hopes he's the next Joel Embiid, where he's going to be healthy, and then it's going to turn around, but we haven't seen it yet.
So, there's going to have to, and David Griffin promised, they're going to rethink how they approach his health from their standpoint, but that there's only so much they can do.
You can't eat yourself out the league.
Yeah.
That's just the bottom line. When you are hurt and you realize that, again, the body type you have, that you're going to pick up weight, you got to do something to counter that so that you can come back. And then the mixed messages at the end of the season, he's coming back, he's not coming back, he's ready, and then you see him on the sidelines, and you see how great a shape he was in during the season, and then you see him falling out of shape, and I think it frustrates a lot of people, and probably within the organization as well as the fan base.
Yeah, and there are also, with Zion, is some nightlife concerns. I'm not going to go into them, but the Pelicans do know what he's doing at night. It's nothing illegal, but they're concerned off the court also. So
there's a maturity issue.
I think there is a maturity issue. There's no doubt there's got to be conversations in that building right on the Airline Highway. Do we move on from Zion? What is the market for him? Because there's got to be a conversation happening right now with Trajan Langdon, Gail Benson, Dennis Laucha, and David Griffin. Can we possibly move on from this guy? If it hadn't come to that yet, but I guarantee you
got to get some value, though.
Yes. Here's where I empathize with the Pelicans' brain trust on Zion, is that they had to pick him. Right. They had to pick him.
Right.
And then now that they have him, because of how productive he has been when he has played, if they trade him and they don't get really good value in return, and then if he goes on to be really successful with somebody else, whoever was in charge when he was traded will live in infamy in New Orleans. They're done. It's over.
It's true.
So the stakes are really, really high for them in a trade.
Yeah.
And it's almost safer career-wise to keep him.
Right.
And if he doesn't get healthy and produce during the life of his contract, you almost have a built-in excuse.
Right.
I mean, that stinks for the fan base if that's the case.
But you have to, as an organization, you have to anticipate this, and you have to make sure you have a plan B. Which is why I think this offseason, I keep hearing people talk about they're going to work on the fringes. No, you got some guys that got some expiring contracts. You need to bring in another, I've said dogs with rings. Guys that are tough, that can bring some physicality and some toughness to this team, something they don't have right now. They're a soft team. And then they have some championship pedigree. They've won before. They know how to win. They don't have anybody on this team that does that.
You're right. I will give it to C.J. McCollum. He fought this year.
Of course
played through a ton of injuries. The Brandon Ingram injury probably could have came back a little earlier, probably a month or so earlier, but he decided to hold on the other side. So that's a problem going the opposite way. So you need buy-in, and I don't know if they have full buy-in on that team right now, and they wind up not making the playoffs this year.
And again, that's a mortal sin when you talk about again with Monty Williams getting fired, Budenholzer getting fired, Doc Rivers getting fired. These are guys that, again, that are having the best records in the leagues, going to the playoffs. You got to believe Willie Green's on a little bit of a hot seat here, okay? And I'm wondering what they're going to do in terms of maybe bringing in another head coach, to be a former head coach, to be sitting next to him on the bench. But, I mean, if other teams are firing their coaches, and those coaches were coaches of the year, and your coaches 2 years in make the playoffs, don't make the playoffs, this is pretty much a defining year for him.
Yeah. Willie Green was a top assistant under who before the Pelicans hired him? It would be interesting if, but
do you see him come back?
I think Monty's going to wind up in either Milwaukee or Philly.
Right, and even if he didn't, I don't think he's come back to New Orleans based on, again, power struggle. They go with Demps, they don't go with him. So I just don't see it. We'll table the Pels there. I want to get to college baseball, and I want to touch on hopefully LSU Tulane before we get out of base in football. LSU 40-12, 17-9, fifth in the nation. They're second in the SEC West. They've lost 2 consecutive SEC series to Auburn and Mississippi State. They got at Georgia this week. The pressure is mounting on this team. You can see it. Again, Floyd had a decent outing as their number 2 pitcher last week. It's Skeens and then nobody else really in terms of that bullpen. You cover a lot of LSU sports. What's the outlook for this team? A lot of LSU fans are already giving up on this team that was number 1 almost the entire year now, okay? And wondering if they're going to get even a national seed with only 17 wins in the SEC.
A lot of talk on Monday about canceling those flights to Omaha, Nebraska. A lot of people now contemplating, are they even going to be a national top 8 seed? I was like, whoa! I'm like, man, let's just slow a little down right now. They're still
people lined up on the bridge. They're on the ledge right now.
Yeah. Paul Skeens is a guaranteed win on Friday night. Then you get if you can get to tie Floyd to like 7 innings and it's almost a win, you're okay on Saturday. But the bullpen, I don't know who's that guy in the bullpen. Thatcher Hurd, I heard a ton of positivity out of him, and he's done nothing for the purple and gold this year. And then Blake Money. I mean, Blake Money used to be a Friday starter. Now he's like a midweek starter. Like he started against McNeese the other night. Yeah, no. They're having trouble finding that third starter right now. And then the worst part is the bullpen's struggling, and now your top hitter is in a funk right now. I mean, he's still batting around 450, which I call a funk. And as Brett alluded to, he's doing a story on Dylan Cruz and Paul Skeens, possibly going 1 and 2. But Dylan Cruz is in a little of a slump right now. He did have 3 hits on Sunday against Mississippi State. But you would expect that Mississippi State's the worst team in the SEC, and you lost 2 out of 3.
Right.
So everybody's on freak-out mode right now. And, there's a lot of talk about Omaha is in the rearview mirror. I would say slow down all that. You still have one of the best hitting lineups in America. Jay Johnson has his pitching coach. He came from the Minnesota Twins, so they can kind of maybe figure it out. I wouldn't.
So pump the brakes.
Yeah, they're at Georgia this week, and they have Hoover next week. Maybe you can get you got a guaranteed win on Friday. And this week it's Thursday. So
that's 18. What about Brett? Your thoughts?
Yeah, people get annoyed with me because I don't take like extreme positions, but I don't think that their series against Mississippi State proved that that they're in a downward spiral and that there's no hope for them. I just think it proved that they are vulnerable for the reason that a lot of good teams are vulnerable, which is, yeah, they don't have enough starting pitching depth and bullpen depth, but they scored 13 runs in one of the games they lost, right?
Yeah.
So,
but they didn't score after the 5th inning.
Okay. Yeah, and so they weren't able to score in the clutch in that game. But baseball is, I mean, players have slumps. Sometimes it has a ripple effect. Teams have slumps. It's your performance can vacillate a little bit as a team throughout the year, and they've been good most of the year. So I think they're still a favorite to go to Omaha, but they really do have to lock in and play better than they did last weekend for sure.
Last 2 weekends.
The last 2 weekends. They're on the road at Georgia. See how they do there. Right. I think the SEC tournament's going to be more telling as to, I mean, how many. There's been since I've been here 20 years now, but I can remember some LSU teams that had played some mediocre ball going into the SEC tournament, and all of a sudden they couldn't lose. Yeah. Right, and then they went all the way to Omaha. They didn't necessarily win the whole thing, but we've seen LSU have some magic in Hoover, Alabama, and then
Let's hope so. Guys, I want to mention again, UNO is 31-21. They're 11-10. They're 4th in the Southland now. They play first place Nichols this weekend at UNO. Nichols 29-20, 14-7. They're first place in the Southland. Tulane is in last place in the AAC at 14-37, 7-14. They got Memphis this weekend in Memphis. Congratulations, Delgado, 42-11, 14-0 in their conference. They're in the National Junior College South Central District Championship. If they win, they move on to the Division I World Series. And then Dillard, of course, in their first year with baseball. What a great story. Again, they won the conference. They made it to NAIA regionals, losing both games, but a great year nevertheless. Nichols for real?
I will say this with the Southland, and we talk about this in the sports department every day, it just goes down to the tournament. It's whoever gets red hot in that tournament. Yes. Southeastern got hot and won that last year. Nichols is, I think this is the second year the head coach has been in Thibodale. They're coming here this weekend for a Thursday, Friday, Saturday series. I know we're going to go out and get a post-game reaction on Saturday. It's going to go down in the tournament. Yeah. It's just that's just the way it is. Yeah, they're so tightly compacted, and there's only one bid for that league.
One more question real quick for both of you guys. Got less than a minute. Logan Diggs, transfer from Notre Dame, coming to LSU in the transfer portal. How big is that?
He's RB1 now. I think he's the starting running back when they go to Orlando to play Florida State. I think right behind them will be Josh Williams, Noah Cain. I think maybe John Emery Jr., this might be the end of the road. We'll see. Maybe his grades popped up this semester. He can be back. You got the 2 rookies coming in. You got Armani Goodwin on the roster. But I think Logan Diggs is your number 1 running back going into the first game.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Garland. It's, it's interesting to see, Brian Kelly continuing to do well in the transfer portal.
He's been killing it. Yeah. He really has. Between him and Kim Mulkey, it's incredible the quick turnaround on both of those programs, which I think puts a lot of pressure on McMahon with the basketball team, and now with again the team faltering when baseball, Jay Johnson as well.
Yeah, it's a lot of winning.
It is.
Jay's in his second year and they're contending for a title. Kim Mulkey won in their second year. Brian Kelly and the Tigers have a fantastic shot to win it all this year. They're high in the odds right now. I don't like their over/under at 9.5. I think it should be higher. I only see like 1 loss on their schedule, possibly 2. It's a toss-up in Florida State, but I think the only other loss possibly at Alabama.
And Tulane expected to have a good season again.
Oh yeah, I'll be at Gillen Stadium in week 2 when they play the Ole Miss Rebels.
Yep, no doubt. Garland, Gillen, Brett Martel, thanks so much for joining us today on the panel. Appreciate it. All right, thanks so much for tuning in. Again, so many ways to catch our program now. All you have to do is again go to the to your screen. There is a QR code that you can click on. It'll take you either to my website, ericasher.com, or the WLAE-TV YouTube page. But again, choose your favorite time slot. Set your DVR so you never miss Inside New Orleans Sports. You catch me on the radio 4 to 6 weekdays, 106.1 FM Nash Icon. You can listen live at ericasher.com, also the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn Radio app, our digital platforms, and Apple, Spotify, also Anchor are all places where you can catch the podcast of the program on a daily basis. I want to thank our underwriters who make this show possible. We appreciate each and every one of them. Please support our underwriters. Also, the WLAE production staff, which includes Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Logan Raffia, Isabella Badagno, and also Alex Chacon, and our director, William Hill. For Garland Gillen and Brett Martel, I'm Eric Asher. Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.